Hey, Billy Glisson with PowerCore 360. Still on our theme of effortless power in the golf swing, really with the benefit being distance, accuracy, and consistency. Talking about how the body won't or can't turn, and today's topic is about the hip, or the hips if you would. Is it flexibility or strength? It's actually both. We're going to be able to do strength exercises, but before we do some strength, for most people out there, most golfers out there, if they're a little bit older, been sitting a lot, front of the hips are so locked down that we actually have to do some stretching to open it up and then strengthen it to keep it open, if that makes sense. I'm going to walk you through an assessment, but first, once again, the housekeeping. If you're not supposed to do any of these things, you've got hip, back, spine, ankle, knee, hip, whatever the issues are, and you're not supposed to do it, don't do it. If you start to do it and it hurts, stop. Hey, in the golf swing, to create effortless power, shot control in terms of accuracy, and obviously consistency, it comes down to hip turn as well as shoulder turn. Well, we're talking about hip turn here. The reason I'm sitting right now is because we all tend to do this. We sit in a variety of different locations, but the reality is when we sit, the muscles and the elastic tissues on the front of the thigh, front of the hip, front of the groin, and actually a lot of those muscles actually go up and attach to the front of the spine. They all tend to be short, and so because we're there many hours per day, it's like being in a cast. Then when we stand up, and we want to have full extension, be able to stand up, what ends up happening is so many of us are so tight in the front, it tips our pelvis forward, it arches our back. We can't actually complete a full backswing because the hips won't actually turn because of the tightness in these muscles. So the reality is we need to stretch these guys first. The way we're going to stretch these guys is, and actually let's do a quick assessment. If you get down on your right knee, a lot of you are going to find out you put your right knee on the ground, left foot forward, and if you try to take your hips and pelvis forward, a lot of you are going to get to the point where you're looking down here and you see that your thigh, you can't even get it straight up and down. What it should be is I should be able to move my hips forward where I have about a 15-degree angle going back. That's considered full range of motion, full flexibility for the hip to go back about 15 degrees. So many of you, because of the tightness on the front of the thigh, hip, spine, and so on and so forth, you get down here and everything just stops. Well, that's your assessment to tell you your hips are tight in front. And unfortunately, this tightness in these parts of the muscles, once again, limit your rotation. Well, if you can't rotate in the backswing, can't rotate in the downswing, you're not going to hit the ball as hard. A lot of things are going to happen in terms of your ability to control the direction and, of course, just being consistent. It's going to be inconsistent. So anyway, this is really important. Another piece of this, then when we stand up, if we put this into some practical application, if I get into kind of an address setup here and I go into my backswing, what I should be able to do is once again have this full turn of my shoulders and my hips to be able to go 45 degrees that direction. If my hips are so tight because all these tissues are tight, then I'm not actually going to be able to turn very far. And so either I'm going to slide, something else is going to happen that's going to impact negatively our distance, our accuracy, and our consistency. So on the backswing, it impacts you. As once again, we've talked about, we want to be able to load into the body sling, the elastic tissues. And then as we start our downswing, we want our hips to actually be able to go and turn the other direction. If I've got good flexibility on the front side of my right thigh and hip, I'm going to be able to get down to impact. I'm going to be able to keep my head and body behind the ball through impact. And I'm going to be able to get this knee down, and you'll see my head and shoulders are behind the ball. If you're tight through here, what's going to happen is your backswing will be limited. You're going to sway or slide. And as you start your downswing, you're going to get about right through here. And as these muscles are tight, it's going to pull your upper body forward. So watch a lot of you guys. You'll watch your swing or watch your partner swing, and you're going to see their shoulders coming down over the top instead of finishing where the pros do, with their head and everything behind the ball. The hips have rotated through, belly button's pointing down the line. It's the tightness on the right thigh, front of the right thigh, and it's actually same thing on the left side. This is impacted as well. Part of the reason that the pros can once again get through and keep their head behind the ball, they have the length and flexibility through the muscles on the front side of the left hip and thigh and spine. Amateurs, once again, because of the tightness, you try to rotate through, and that's what's pulling you forward. Stretch these guys up, strengthen the muscles to give you the ability to do that. You're going to hit the ball further, you're going to hit the ball much straighter, and you're going to have much more consistency. Okay, so for one of the fixes for lack of ability to turn your hips right and left, is the same thing we did for the assessment. I put my right knee down on the ground, left foot here. I'm going to basically take my hips and pelvis forward until I feel a comfortable stretch. It might vary, it will vary depending on the individual. Some of you may feel the tightness in the front of your quadricep, your thigh, some of it in front of the hip, some of it in the groin, some through the spine, some of all the above. The key is I want you to take this here, and this is going to be a stretch. This is going to be held for 60 seconds. I'm going to take the pelvis forward. If I'm really good, I'm going to turn my right butt muscle on if my right knee's on the ground. That's going to help me actually make this stretch become better. And hold it is I'm going to be able to take this forward, find a comfortable stretch. I'm not going to force it, something I can hold in a comfortable position for 60 seconds while I'm breathing. I'm going to keep my glute on. I'm going to hold this. And then after 60 seconds, I'm going to turn around and do the same thing on the other side. All right, this is a strengthening exercise for the muscles around the hips and pelvis. And once again, ultimately our target is really to, after we've stretched the front of the quad and the thighs and the front of the spine, once we've opened that up, stretched it out, now we want to actually strengthen the muscles on the back side of the hip. They'll actually help take that into this new range so we can actually maintain that and then use that in our golf swing. I essentially have a ankle cuff on my right ankle. I have one of our gray bands on there with our cuff. I'm going to scoot forward here, and all I'm going to do, I'm going to use, you can use a stick, you can lean onto anything. Basically, I'm putting all my weight on my left foot. I'm going to stand tall, and all I'm going to do is pick up my right knee. As I'm picking up my right knee, the band is resisting it, so I'm having to use the muscles, those muscles on the front of the thigh and the hip and the spine that are actually weak. I'm going to strengthen them. And I'm going to hold these for our 6-second count, trying to keep that knee up. And as I'm doing that, I'm actually pushing my left foot into the ground, picking my right knee up. So there's actually a lot of muscles around my hips and pelvis, and actually my left glutes probably working the hardest of anything to hold this position. So once again, 6-second holds, I'm breathing. I'm using a light gray band. As you get stronger with this, you can go to black, you can go to orange, you can go to red if you're using our stuff. Just make sure you use the appropriate resistance band. All right, working on strengthening the hips so I can get more hip turn. I've got my PowerCore 360 hip harness on, one of our orange bands. You guys would probably start with a gray or probably a black band depending on your size and weight and strength. I'm going to get into my address posture. I'm going to get set up, and I'm basically just going to go through my back swing. I'm going to turn my body, turn my shoulders, turn my spine, and turn my hips and pelvis at the same time. I'm taking it to in range. And I'm holding that position like we've done everything else, 6 seconds while I breathe. And right now I'm strengthening all the muscles I need to perform the exact movement I want to perform in the golf backswing. All right, a really good strengthening activity for hip turn. We've got our PowerCore 360 hip harness on, one of our orange bands. For most of you, you would start, depending on your size and weight and age, you'd probably start with the gray band or the black band. I'm going up to about a moderate resistance band. And essentially I'm going to get it, this is very golf specific because I'm going to get in my golf position, my golf address posture. I'm going to go through my backswing. And what I'm going to do then is actually as I go through to clear my left hip, I'm actually having to use the muscles on my hips and back and spine, and actually having to use my feet to push against the ground. You hear guys talking all the time about how to use their feet with the ground. Well, this is how you do it. Put the hip harness on, use resistance, go through the backswing, go through your downswing, and I'm going slowly. And I'm going to actually take this to my in range, and just like everything else, I'm going to hold it while I breathe for 6 seconds. And I'm going to do 2 to 4 reps of that. Take it to that in range, I'm holding it. I'm training the golf specific muscles. Notice I'm keeping my head behind the ball. I'm not lunging forward. Right now, my back glute, my back legs are having to work, the muscles back here having to work to push me through and hold me there. And then I'm getting a huge stretch on the front side of my groin, my thigh, and then the muscles on the back side of my left glute, the muscles that are important to clear the left hip to get it out of the way, they're also having to work. After I get done with my stretching for the front of my thigh and my hips, and then I go into my 2 strengthening activities, I should be able to go right into my address posture, get set up, and go through my swing, backswing motion, and I should feel my hips, my spine, my core, everything's rotating back out of the way. And then I can go through my downswing, I can feel my hips turn, my left hip clear out of the way. I can stay back behind the ball because all the muscles on the front side of the hips, thigh, and spine are allowing my hips to turn much better. my belly button to get down the line, my head to stay behind the ball. All that's going to allow me to load into the body sling, create effortless power, hit the ball straight because the turn of the body is going to help square the club up. And then, of course, I'm going to be much more consistent. Okay, in addition to what I showed you in the exercises themselves, the how-to piece on these exercise movements, kind of like what we did for the shoulder. We're doing a warm-up first, 5 to 7 minutes, a little cardio, a little walk, nothing crazy, get a little sweat going, a little core temperature up, slow, controlled movements, no pain, no discomfort. We're not going to force anything. We're, for the most part, going to work on in-range, where we're going to hold the in-range movements for about 6 seconds while we're breathing. And we're typically going to do 2 to 4 reps as all of these exercises. If you like this video, please like us down below. Consider subscribing. If you want further information, go to PowerCore360.com.